So to better understand the information that is provided on the periodic table, we have to understand something about atomic structure. As we said in the last video, all matter is made up of elements. And the element is a substance that cannot be broken into simpler substances, and all of the elements in the universe are listed on the periodic table. So what is an atom? An atom is the smallest particle of an element. And the nucleus is a very important region in the atom. It's the most dense region, and it is also at the center of the atom. So it's important to understand that the atom is the smallest particle of an element, and that in the middle of the atom, you've got this very dense region called a nucleus. Just kind of like in biology, you have the central part of the cell is called the nucleus. In chemistry, the central part of the atom is called the nucleus. So within the atom, while it is the smallest particle of an element, there are particles that make up the atom itself. These are called subatomic particles. And sub is meaning it's part of or underneath, like under the heading of the atom, just like a subway is underneath the ground. So when we think about the subatomic particles, there's three main subatomic particles. You have the proton, and protons have positive electric charge. This is kind of easy to remember because positive starts with P, just like proton. Two other items that are important to remember about protons is that protons, while they're very small, they contribute significant mass to the atom. So when we think about the overall mass of the atom, a significant percentage of that mass is due to the proton or protons, because most atoms have more than one. When we think about neutrons, they're another type of subatomic particle. They are also in the nucleus, and they are like the proton. They also have in common with the proton that they contribute significant mass to the atom. So a significant percentage of the mass of the atom will be due to neutrons. Neutrons have no electric charge. So they're contributing mass, but they're not contributing charge. And we see here neutron and neutral, those two words are very similar because no electric charge is considered a neutral charge or a zero charge. Then we have the third subatomic particle, which is the electron. So one way to remember this is that if protons are positive, right, neutrons are neutral, which means they don't have an electric charge. The electrons, you have positive and you have negative charges. So electrons are going to have the negative charge because protons already have the positive charge. Electrons are very different than the protons and the neutrons in the sense that they're so small that the percent of the mass of the atom that they contribute is essentially insignificant. You don't have to think about them in terms of mass in the atom. That's why this says does not contribute significant mass to the atom. And electrons are not located in the nucleus. They move very, very quickly around the nucleus, so quickly that it's in fact very hard to pinpoint exactly where they are. You can pinpoint kind of where they probably are, but you can't really pinpoint exactly where they are. Some points about these subatomic particles that are very important to note and remember is that atoms of an element, the atoms of an element must always have the same number of protons. So if you change the number of protons, you no longer have the same element. If you want to have, for example, carbon here, this atomic number we are going to learn tells us how many protons we have. If you have an atom of carbon, you have 6 protons. You always have to have 6 protons. If an atom of carbon loses a proton, it's no longer carbon. It becomes boron because boron has 5 protons. When we think about isotopes, isotopes are important because atoms of the same element can have different amounts of neutrons. So if you have a different amount of neutrons, you're not going to change the charge, but because the neutron does contribute significant mass to the atom, you are going to change the mass of that atom. And that's going to be important when we start to talk about mass numbers on the periodic table, which we'll see in the next video. But it's just important to remember protons have to be the same, neutrons can be different. And when they are different, then you have different versions or isotopes of a given element. Last thing that we need to learn about when we talk about basic atomic structure is that atoms often gain or lose electrons. Remember, the protons are in the nucleus, the neutrons are in that nucleus, they're in the center, but the electrons are moving around the outside very quickly, so they can be gained or lost. And that helps to determine the properties of a given element, when their electrons are gained or lost. And then this term ion is a very important term. And an ion can either have a negative or positive charge. For example, if you gain electrons, electrons are negative. So if you're gaining electrons, your charge is going to be negative. If you lose electrons, then your charge is going to be positive because you have less negatively charged subatomic particles.